The snow was falling in slow, quiet curtains outside my apartment window when my phone lit up with a video call from Grandma June. I was still in my slippers, heating leftover soup on the stove, telling myself Christmas Eve alone wasn't so bad. I'd convinced myself my family was just busy, the way they always were, too distracted with Selena's glow and their own holiday routines to remember that I existed. But when I picked up the phone, the screen filled with warm light, clattering silverware, and a long table draped in red and gold. Behind my grandmother's face, I saw movement. Shadows of people passing trays, laughter echoing through the room, glasses clinking. And then I recognized the table. My parents' dining room, Christmas dinner, already happening, without me. Grandma's expression shifted from joy to confusion when she saw my face. "Sweetheart, why aren't you here? Everyone's already eating." My breath caught. "Eating? Grandma, I wasn't invited." Her eyes widened. She lowered the phone and turned her head toward the room. For a second, I thought maybe she would say she'd made a mistake, that this wasn't what it looked like. But then I heard my mother's voice in the background, bright, cheerful, and unmistakably celebratory. "Pass the carving knife, Selena. Smile for the camera, honey." When Grandma lifted the phone again, her face was pale. "Lauren, they told me they sent your invitation. I thought—" But she didn't finish the sentence. Because behind her, at the long table glowing with candles and garlands, I saw my family. All of them. My mother, my father, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since last summer. And at the center, like always, Selena, laughing, shining, clinking champagne glasses while people toasted to her new promotion at the marketing firm. I stared at the screen, frozen. And then I saw it. The space at the end of the table where my chair used to be every Christmas Eve. Gone. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had removed the seat entirely. "Grandma," I whispered, "I didn't get an invitation, not a call, not even a text." Her voice trembled. I don't understand. Your mother said—" She bit her lip, and finally said the words that shattered the night around me. "She said you might bring the mood down, that you've been too sad lately. She didn't want drama." I felt something inside me crack, slow and deep, the way ice breaks before it splits open. Behind her, Selena raised her glass for a photo, smiling wider than I'd ever seen her smile at me. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I didn't remember grabbing my coat or slipping into my boots. I only knew that 10 minutes later I was driving through the snow-covered streets toward the Whitmore house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The neighborhood glowed with Christmas lights, warm yellows, soft reds, twinkling whites. It should have felt magical. Instead, every house I passed felt like another reminder of what I had never really had. A family who wanted me. When I pulled into the driveway, I could hear laughter drifting out through the windows. I stood on the porch for a long moment, breath fogging in the freezing air, my heart hammering so loudly I worried they might hear it from inside. Then I rang the bell. The door opened, and there stood my mother, Denise Whitmore, wearing a sparkling green sweater and an expression of startled irritation. "Lauren, what on earth are you doing here?" I stepped inside without waiting for permission. The warmth hit me like a wave, along with the sight of the table I'd seen on Grandma's phone. Candles flickered, plates piled with food. Our family gathered comfortably around a celebration I wasn't meant to see. "Why didn't you invite me?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. My father looked up from carving the ham, his expression tightening. Selena swirled wine in her glass and smirked softly. My mother sighed, as if I were a child interrupting grown-up conversation. "Lauren, this was supposed to be a light, joyful evening. You've been so emotional lately. We didn't want any tension." "Tension?" I repeated quietly. My father put down the knife. "We just thought you wouldn't enjoy a big gathering," he said. "You always seem uncomfortable." Selena lifted her glass. "Honestly," she chimed in, "it's been easier without you. Everyone can relax." A few aunts glanced at me apologetically but said nothing. That was the thing about my family. They didn't need to raise their voices to hurt me. Their silence always did the job. I looked at the table again. In the spot where my chair used to be, a dessert tray sat neatly in its place. Neater without me. Better without me. And suddenly, everything made sense. Every forgotten birthday, every downplayed accomplishment, every time Selena was praised while I was brushed aside. It hadn't been absent-mindedness. It had been choice. A very deliberate choice. Was I ever actually wanted here? I asked quietly. No one spoke. My mother's eyes darted toward the tree. My father adjusted his tie. Selena took another sip of wine. The answer hung in the air without needing to be spoken. I turned toward the door. If you didn't want me here, I said, you could have just said it. Lauren, don't make a scene, my father snapped. This night is supposed to be pleasant. I laughed, a hollow sound I didn't recognize. You don't have to worry, I won't ruin anything. And I stepped out into the cold, pulling the door shut behind me. Their laughter resumed almost immediately. The snow was falling harder as I crossed the porch, each flake sharp against my skin. I walked slowly toward my car, feeling the weight of years pressing on my shoulders. Years of trying to earn a seat at a table that had already decided it had no place for me. I sat inside the car, breath trembling, staring at the house glowing warm behind frosted windows. How many Christmases had I tried to participate? How many years had I shown up with homemade gifts, only to watch Selena unwrap another piece of expensive jewelry while mine was placed aside, forgotten? In middle school, I had spent hours making hand-painted ornaments for everyone, only to overhear my mother call them messy little things we can throw away later. In high school, when I'd won the regional essay contest, my father had said, "That's nice," before turning to praise Selena's choir performance for the 10th time. Even as an adult, after landing my job at Neuralink Systems, they had said nothing except, "At least you'll be financially stable." That was the most praise I'd ever received. But tonight, that empty chair, replaced entirely, it was different. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't accidental. It was the proof I'd spent years trying to ignore. I was the outsider in my own family. I drove home slowly, my vision blurring at every stoplight. By the time I reached my apartment, the city felt quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I dropped onto the couch, still wearing my coat, staring at the dark living room. For a long time I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't breathe. I just sat there, feeling the ache settle through my bones. Then, without meaning to, I opened my phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing from my mother, nothing from my father, not even a "where did you go" from Selena. The only notification was from Grandma, sent minutes after the call ended. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I thought they had included you. I love you." I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. It was the smallest message, but it was the only one that made me feel human. The rest of the night, I sat in silence, letting the truth settle, letting the shock wear off, letting the hurt breathe. And somewhere between the ringing quiet of the apartment and the memory of that glowing Christmas table, one realization took root. Small at first, then sharp as ice. They didn't forget me. They didn't overlook me. They didn't misunderstand me. They erased me. And the worst part wasn't the erasure. It was how effortless it was for them. I pulled a blanket over myself and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. My grandmother's trembling voice echoed in my mind. "They told me you might bring the mood down." I felt something shift inside me, a subtle but irreversible turning. They had shut me out of their happiest night. And maybe that meant it was time I stopped trying to force my way back in. Instead of crying, I breathed, long, steady breaths that tasted like winter. Outside my window, the snow kept falling. Inside my chest, a decision began to take shape. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, or where it would lead, but I knew it was the beginning of a different kind of story. One that didn't start at the Whitmore table. One that didn't revolve around earning a place among people who had already decided I had none. That night, as the city lights flickered and the world settled under a fresh coat of snow, I whispered something into the quiet. Something soft. Something new. Maybe I don't need them to belong. I didn't know it then, but that Christmas Eve, the night they shut me out, would be the moment everything in my life began to change. It would take months for the rest of the world to see it. But for me, it began right there, in a silent apartment, with snow falling beyond the glass, and a heart that finally, painfully, understood the truth. They didn't want me. And one day soon, they would realize just how much that decision would cost them. The morning after Christmas Eve felt strangely quiet, as if the world had stopped spinning for a moment, just to let me sit in the heaviness of everything that had happened. I woke up still wearing the clothes from the night before, my back aching from having slept half upright on the couch. The blanket had slipped halfway off and the apartment was cold enough that my breath fogged slightly in the air. For a few seconds I didn't move. I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself that the entire night had been some twisted dream. But the silence told the truth. There were no missed calls asking if I got home safely. No apology messages, no explanations, not even one half-hearted excuse from my mother. Christmas had happened without me, and apparently that was exactly how everyone wanted it. I dragged myself into the kitchen, made a cup of coffee I barely tasted, and tried to settle into some semblance of routine. Outside, the snow had thickened overnight, softening the world in a way that felt mocking. I sat at the small dining table, cupping the mug between my palms for warmth, staring at nothing. Every breath felt tight, as if something inside me had cracked but hadn't fully broken yet. Part of me kept replaying the scene on a loop, Selena laughing with her champagne, my father carving the ham without looking up, my mother sighing like I was an inconvenience, the missing chair replaced with a platter of desserts. Even Grandma June's voice haunted my thoughts. They said you might bring the mood down. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temples. I wasn't even angry yet. I was numb. So numb that even the thought of crying felt like a distant possibility I wasn't strong enough to reach. By noon, the numbness had become unbearable. I grabbed my coat and boots, needing to be anywhere but inside my apartment. I walked without direction, letting the cold slap my cheeks awake. The streets were quieter than usual, coated in fresh snow. Families passed by me with shopping bags, kids pulling sleds, couples holding hands. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like watching a movie through a window, close enough to see, too far to touch. I ended up at a small park near the river, the kind of place I used to go as a teenager when I needed space from the chaos at home. I sat on a bench dusted with snow, my breath puffing out in small clouds. Why did this hurt so much? I'd known my place in the family for years. I'd known Selena was the favorite, the golden girl. I'd known my achievements were invisible unless they benefited the family's image. I'd known that any moment I showed sadness, anxiety, or exhaustion was labeled as too much. I'd known all of that, but knowing something doesn't soften it when it unfolds in front of you with cruel clarity. My phone rang, startling me. For a heartbeat, I thought it might finally be one of them. But when I checked the screen, it was Julian. His name lit up against the winter light, and something inside me softened. Not relief, but a reminder that there was at least one person in my life who didn't require me to perform happiness. I answered, my voice barely steady. "Hey, Lauren." His tone was gentle, warm in a way that made the cold burn sharper. "You okay? I saw your message last night. You said you went home early." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, something happened." He waited. Julian never pushed, never demanded answers I wasn't ready to give. His silence wasn't pressure. It was space. And suddenly the words came out of me before I could stop them. My family had Christmas dinner without me. A long pause. Without you? They never told me. I found out because my grandmother called me from the table. My breath hitched. They didn't want me there. The wind rustled through the bare branches around me. Julian exhaled slowly on the other end of the line, the kind of breath that carried sadness and anger layered together. Lauren, I'm so sorry. I squeezed my eyes shut. Hearing someone acknowledge it, someone who wasn't pretending I deserved it, nearly broke me open. I don't know why it hurts this much, I whispered. I should be used to this by now. You shouldn't have to be, he said quietly. I felt tears gather in the corners of my eyes, blurring the snowy landscape. I wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. I needed to hear your voice. I'm glad you called, he said. Do you want me to come over? I shook my head instinctively, then realized he couldn't see me. No, I just need a little time. Okay, I'm here when you're ready. He didn't say cheer up or don't take it personally. He didn't offer hollow reassurances. He just stayed with me a moment longer, breathing softly on the other end of the line before saying goodbye. I stayed in the park until the cold sank into my bones. By the time I returned home, the air inside felt warmer than before, as if stepping out into the world had reminded me that being alone wasn't always a curse. It was also a refuge from being hurt. Still, I couldn't sit still. My thoughts wouldn't settle. So I turned to cleaning, the kind of restless organizing one does when trying to make sense of chaos. I pulled open drawers, straightened stacks of mail, refolded blankets. Then, in a small wooden box I hadn't opened in years, I found something I hadn't expected. An old photo, me and Selena. From when we were kids, I was maybe 8, she 5. We were standing in front of the Christmas tree. Selena was beaming, dressed in a sparkly red dress. I was beside her, wearing a sweater too big for me, holding a handmade ornament I'd painted. The edges of the photo were worn from time. I stared at it for a long moment. Back then, before the world taught us our roles, Selena used to cling to me, follow me everywhere. She used to ask me to braid her hair, to help her with homework, to walk her to school on the first day of kindergarten. She used to tell me she loved me more than anyone. But slowly as we grew, I became something else. A shadow next to her spotlight, a reminder of what she wasn't, a sibling to step over on her climb upward. I set the photo aside, unsure whether the ache in my chest was grief or nostalgia. Maybe both. When I tried to focus on something else, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Grandma June. A message, just one line. I love you, sweetheart. Please don't think this was your fault. My eyes burned again, but not from pain, from gratitude. I typed back, I know, Grandma, I love you too. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And in that moment, something small but real settled in my chest. Not healing, not yet, but the start of it. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the buildings and left the city in a soft blue haze, I made soup again and sat by the window. The Christmas lights from the apartments across the street glowed softly, each one a small universe of laughter, conversation, warmth. I didn't feel jealousy exactly, more like longing. I wondered what it felt like to walk into a room and be welcomed without hesitation, to be asked how you were doing and have the question actually mean something, to know there would always be a seat waiting for you, no matter how sad you'd been that year or how quiet or how tired. Maybe someday, I thought, I would know that feeling. Maybe someday I would sit at a table with people who didn't measure my worth by how cheerful I appeared or how convenient I was. Maybe someday I would have a family, not the one I was born into, but the one I created. The thought was soft, fragile, but real. As the apartment dimmed around me, the city fading into night, I let myself breathe, just breathe. Not for my family, not for anyone else, just for me. It was the smallest beginning. But it was a beginning. And even though I didn't know it yet, the life that waited beyond this night, beyond this hurt, would be bigger than anything I'd ever allowed myself to imagine. I returned to work 2 days after Christmas, telling myself that the structure would help me feel normal again. But as I stepped into the lobby of Neuralink Systems, with its sleek marble floors and humming screens, the normalcy I expected didn't come. The world felt slightly out of sync, as if everything had shifted a fraction of an inch while I wasn't looking. Colleagues wished me happy holidays. I smiled, nodded, pretended I'd had a perfectly fine Christmas. I didn't mention the empty chair at the Whitmore house, or the cold flurry of my mother's voice, or the way Selena had said, "It's easier without you." I kept my head high and walked toward the elevators, clutching my bag a little tighter than usual. When the doors closed behind me, the quiet inside the elevator pressed against my ears. I inhaled deeply, willing myself to focus on what I could control. Work, strategy, numbers, the things that didn't disappear without explanation. By the time the doors opened to the 5th floor, I had tucked the raw edges of my heart neatly away, or at least hidden them well enough that no one would see. My team was already gathering in the large conference room, their laptops open, their energy buzzing with the anticipation of the new year. Brianna waved me over. "Hey, you made it. Good Christmas?" The question hit me with the blunt force of irony. I managed a half smile. "Quiet? Yours?" "Chaotic," she said, laughing. "My mom burned the ham and blamed the oven. Classic." I nodded, appreciating her lightness but unable to match it. She didn't notice, thankfully, and turned her attention back to her notes. Our CTO, Dr. Mason Ellis, walked in, tall and composed with his usual air of confident urgency. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands. "We've got a packed quarter ahead. Let's get started." I straightened in my chair, letting the familiarity of work settle my nerves. Mason launched into the updates. New AI architecture milestones, pending partnership announcements, the timeline for the annual tech event. When he said my name, I barely caught it. "And Lauren will be leading the presentation for our behavioral analytics integration." A few heads turned to me. I blinked. "Me?" Mason nodded. "Yes, you built the backbone of this model. You should be the one presenting it to the board, and at the spring showcase." Heat rose to my cheeks. "Thank you. Of course, I'll do it." The team clapped lightly, murmuring encouragement. For a second, everything softened. For a second, I felt seen. After the meeting, Mason pulled me aside as the others filtered out. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly. I froze. Had something slipped through my expression? "I'm fine," I said quickly. "Just holiday exhaustion." He studied me with the perceptiveness of someone who'd been in this industry long enough to recognize the masks people wore. "Well, if you need anything, my door's open." I nodded, grateful but embarrassed by how close his simple concern felt to splitting me open. The rest of the morning moved quickly. Data reviews, system checks, follow-up meetings. I buried myself in productivity, letting it fill the space where sadness still lingered. But around noon, when I stepped into the hallway to refill my water bottle, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from a number I didn't save. "Dad. Please call when free." I stared at the screen as if it were written in a foreign language. I slid the phone back into my bag without responding. In the break room, the window overlooked the frozen river winding through the business district. I stood there, watching sunlight bounce off the ice like scattered glass. My reflection looked oddly distant, shoulders slightly slumped, eyes tired in a way concealer couldn't fix. I'd spent years trying to be unnoticeable in the Whitmore house. At Neuralink, that instinct sometimes followed me like a shadow. Don't stand out too much, don't take up too much space, don't inconvenience anyone. But here, no one asked me to shrink. They asked me to lead, to contribute, to be myself. Maybe that was why the contrast hurt so much. When I returned to my desk, I found an email invitation waiting for me. A rehearsal meeting for the Tech Event's Rising Innovator Award. My name was on the list, shortlisted. My breath caught. I reread the subject line twice, trying to process it. I wasn't a favorite. I wasn't anyone's spotlight. Yet here I was, shortlisted. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling a slow warmth spread beneath my palm. For a moment, I wished I could call someone who'd understand, someone who'd celebrate with me. But the only person who came to mind was Julian. I hesitated, then typed a message. Got some surprising news today. Can I call you later? He replied almost instantly. Always. Let me know when you're free. The simplicity of it made my breath unsteady. He didn't know what the news was, but he was already there. It was a kind of belonging I wasn't used to. At 3 o'clock, we had another meeting. This one smaller, just the product team. When I walked in, Brianna raised both hands in a triumphant gesture. We heard! Rising innovator! Go you! I flushed. You guys saw already? Marcus grinned. It's on the internal feed. Big news. Eloise leaned forward. You deserve it, Lauren. The sincerity in her voice made my eyes sting unexpectedly. I blinked quickly, nodding. Thank you. Really. After the meeting, as we packed up, Marcus nudged me lightly. Hey, a bunch of us are grabbing dinner Friday. You coming? I hesitated. The thought of sitting at a table surrounded by laughter, without the tension and judgment that filled every Whitmore dinner. It felt foreign, scary, but maybe healing. Yeah, I said softly. I'll come. The afternoon passed in a blur of work. Lines of code, data visualizations, performance forecasts. The rhythm steadied me, but around 5 my phone buzzed again with a notification. This time from Instagram. Someone had tagged me in a photo. My stomach lurched, expecting something from family. But when I opened it, I froze. It was one of the group photos from the small holiday gathering my team had held earlier that month, before Christmas, before everything had fallen apart. I was standing between Brianna and Marcus, smiling in a way I hardly recognized now. The comments were light-hearted, celebratory. No tension, no sarcasm, no undercurrent of comparison. Just people happy to be together. And for the first time in days, I felt a little less alone. When I finally left the office, the sun had set, leaving the sky a deep violet. The city was alive with lights reflecting on snowbanks. My breath fogged as I stepped outside, pulling my coat tighter. As I walked toward the subway, the cold stung my cheeks, but the motion felt grounding. My phone buzzed again, this time a FaceTime request. Julian. I stopped on the sidewalk debating whether to answer. But the thought of his voice, steady and warm, was too tempting. I pressed accept. His face appeared immediately, framed by soft lamplight in his apartment. Hey, he said gently, you made it through the day. I exhaled a laugh. Barely. Want to tell me your news? I bit my lip, startled by a sudden flush of pride. I got shortlisted for the Rising Innovator Award. His eyes widened, then lit with something bright and fierce. Lauren, that's incredible, that's huge. The sincerity in his voice hit me like warmth through the cold air. I'm really proud of you, he added, and the words hit deeper than they should have. Proud. No one in my family had ever said that word to me, not once. Not when I graduated top of my class, not when I got my job at Neuralink, not when I won departmental awards. But Julian said it without hesitation, without reservation, without expecting anything in return. I swallowed, staring at the snowy sidewalk beneath my feet. Thank you, I whispered. It means a lot. He watched me carefully. You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to, but I want you to know this. Your worth isn't determined by who fails to see it. The ache in my chest loosened slowly. I'm trying to believe that. I'll help you, he said, smiling. One step at a time. When we ended the call, my hands were trembling, but not from the cold. Something inside me had shifted, subtle but real. I no longer felt like I was standing outside everything good. For the first time, it felt like a door was opening. I walked the remaining blocks to my apartment with a sense of quiet clarity. When I stepped inside, the silence didn't feel as suffocating. I made tea, sat at my desk, and opened the presentation draft for the tech event. My hands moved steadily over the keyboard, shaping ideas that felt stronger than the doubts echoing in my mind. Around 7, my phone vibrated once more. A text from Grandma June. Thinking of you tonight. You're stronger than you know. I pressed a hand to my chest, letting the words settle. Maybe she was right. Maybe strength wasn't always the loud, victorious kind. Sometimes it was just surviving the night your family shut the door on you, and waking up determined to build a life where you were wanted. I worked late into the evening, interrupted only by the soft hum of the radiator and the distant sound of cars on the street. At some point, I glanced up at the window and saw my reflection, tired but steadier than before. The girl who had stood on that icy porch, begging to be seen, was still inside me, bruised but breathing. But the woman sitting at her desk, shaping her own future, refusing to shrink for anyone, that woman was growing stronger. When I finally turned off the lights and crawled into bed, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. A fragile spark, but real. And as my eyes drifted shut, I whispered to the darkness, as if promising myself something sacred. I won't chase people who don't want me, not anymore. The snow continued falling through the night, blanketing the city in quiet. And somewhere inside that vast, silent world, a new beginning was quietly taking shape, one that had nothing to do with the Whitmore name. The first week of January moved with the kind of speed that leaves you breathless, as if the universe had decided that the only way forward was through motion. I walked into Neuralink on Monday morning, feeling like a different version of myself. Still bruised, still carrying the weight of Christmas Eve in quiet, invisible ways, but no longer willing to fold under it. Something had shifted, and work, with its predictability and structure, became the space where I could breathe again. The office buzzed with post-holiday energy. Screens flickered with dashboards and code, teams huddled in corners with coffee cups, and the hum of focused conversation filled the air. But even in all the noise, I felt oddly steady, as if I'd finally placed one foot on solid ground. When I reached my desk, a notification popped up immediately. Rising Innovator Nominee, Press Session Update. My stomach fluttered. I wasn't used to seeing my name attached to things with weight, at least not outside of spreadsheets and performance reports. I opened the email. It confirmed that I needed to attend a briefing that afternoon for potential speakers at the spring tech event. I inhaled slowly, letting the significance settle. It wasn't pride yet, at least not the kind that glows. It was quieter than that, more like the warmth of stepping into a room where you're finally invited to speak. "Morning, Star," Brianna said, sliding into the seat beside me with a grin. I blinked. "What?" "Well, you're basically famous now," she said, nodding toward her screen. "Internal newsfeed put up a section about nominees. You're front and center." Heat crept up my neck. "Oh, God." "Don't be embarrassed," she laughed. "It's about time people noticed you." Her words caught me off guard. Not because they were dramatic, but because of how casually she said them, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. Before I could respond, the CTO, Dr. Seraphine Liu, appeared in the doorway of her office and motioned me in. I followed her, my pulse quickening. Seraphine was known for being brilliant and razor-sharp, but she also had an uncanny way of reading people. Her office was warm and minimalist, soft music drifting from a corner speaker. She closed the door gently behind me. "Lauren," she said with a smile, "I wanted to congratulate you. The nomination is well-deserved." "Thank you," I said quietly. She studied me for a long, thoughtful moment. "You've been doing exceptional work. Your strategy proposals have changed the trajectory of our next quarter." I nodded, unsure how to respond. "But," she continued, clasping her hands, "visibility brings attention, and attention brings unexpected people." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head. "Sometimes, when the world starts to recognize your value, the ones who overlooked you the longest try to come back. Not because they've changed, but because they smell opportunity." My breath caught. I didn't tell her about Christmas Eve. I didn't need to. She said it like she knew. Her voice softened. "Just be careful who comes knocking." A shiver worked its way down my spine. "I will," I murmured. but part of me already knew it was a warning I'd need sooner rather than later. That afternoon, the boardroom was filled with energy as teams prepared proposal drafts for the new partnership Neuralink was securing with a major European tech firm. The collaboration was a big deal, one that would define our year's roadmap. When Mason, the CEO, entered the room, everyone straightened instinctively. He had the presence of someone who'd built an empire from ground zero and didn't intend to slow down. He scanned the room, then landed on me. "Lauren," he said, "walk us through your user behavior integration model." I swallowed, but my voice held steady as I stood. I pulled up my slides, explaining how the adaptive algorithms would personalize user pathways in real time. As I spoke, the room quieted, not with disinterest, but with attention. Actual attention. By the time I finished, Mason nodded with approval. "Excellent. Your segment will anchor our pitch next month." He paused. "You'll present this yourself." A ripple of pride, strange and fragile, moved through me. "Of course," I said. "I'd be honored." When the meeting ended, a man approached me, mid-30s, camera bag slung over his shoulder, press badge clipped to his jacket. "Lauren Whitmore?" I froze. "Yes?" He extended his hand. "Daniel Cho, TechSphere magazine. We met briefly last month." His grin was friendly, perceptive in a way that made me straighten. "Your nomination caught my eye. I think your story would resonate with a lot of people." "My story?" I repeated warily. He shrugged. "A young woman in AI leading major initiatives in a male-dominated sector. Rising innovator. Genuine talent." He leaned in just slightly. "Unless there's more to the story that should stay off the record?" I stiffened, pulse spiking. Christmas Eve flickered at the edges of my mind like a wound reopening. He raised his hands gently. "Hey, I'm not digging. You just looked familiar. Familiar in the way people do when they've fought harder than most to be where they are." My throat tightened. "I appreciate it," I managed. He smiled warmly. "If you're open to an interview, I'd love to highlight your work." For a moment I imagined my parents stumbling on an article about me, imagined my mother's forced, tight smile, my father's dismissive shrug, Selena's narrowed eyes, and I almost said no. But something inside me, something small and tired but stubborn, whispered, "Why not be seen for once?" "I'll think about it," I said. His eyes softened. "That's all I ask." That evening, I went to dinner with my small circle from Neuralink, Brianna, Marcus, and Eloise. We gathered at a cozy little fusion restaurant downtown. The table was cluttered with steaming bowls and plates of shared dishes. The warm hum of conversation wrapped around us like a cocoon. Marcus raised his glass. "To Lauren, our rising innovator." I laughed, embarrassed. "Can we not?" "No," Brianna said firmly. "We absolutely can." Their smiles were wide, bright, genuine, not performative, not competitive. No shadows of comparison, no one scanning the room to see who was noticing. It felt safe. Safe in a way family dinners had never been. Later, as we walked out into the cold night, Marcus nudged me. "You good?" I exhaled. "Yeah, better than I've been in a while." "Good," he said. "You deserve peace." The words hit deeper than he could have known. When I got home, Julian called. "How's my rising superstar?" he teased gently. I sat on the edge of my bed, letting the warmth in his voice soothe something tightly wound inside me. "Tired," I admitted, "but in a good way." "You sound lighter." I hesitated, then said, "I got offered an interview, a real one, national coverage." "That's incredible," he said. "You've earned it." "Do you think I should do it?" He didn't pause. "Lauren, the world should know what you've built, not for validation, but because it's the truth." My throat tightened. "You really think so?" "I know so," he whispered. And for the first time, I believed him. Before bed, as I plugged in my phone, a notification lit the screen. One last text from an unknown number. "Heard you've been busy. Call us." My breath froze. My father. A hollow pit opened in my stomach. Just as Seraphine had warned, when people start noticing you, the ones who never did suddenly remember your name. I set the phone face down, refusing to let that message stain the night. Instead, I replayed the smiles from dinner, the pride in Julian's voice, the way the team clapped after my presentation. People who wanted me, not for what I could do for them, but because they saw me, really saw me. I turned off the light, sinking into the blankets with a quiet exhale. Outside, the winter wind swept softly against the building, but inside, for the first time in a long time, I felt a small warmth spreading through me. A warmth that whispered, "You are not invisible here. You are not forgettable here. And maybe, just maybe, you never were." Julian picked me up on a Saturday morning, the kind of crisp winter morning where the sun glints against snow in a way that makes everything look softer. I stood outside my apartment building, bundled in a cream wool coat, feeling the familiar pinch of nerves tighten in my stomach. Today was the day he was taking me to Wintercrest Estate. Today I would step into his world, the world of the Crest family, and I didn't know if my heart was ready for kindness on that scale. After everything that had happened over Christmas, kindness almost scared me more than cruelty. Julian leaned over from the driver's seat and opened the door for me. "Ready?" he asked gently. I slid in beside him, pulling the seatbelt across my lap. "As ready as I'll ever be." He smiled, reaching over to brush a strand of hair from my cheek. "They're excited to meet you properly, you know." "That's what I'm afraid of," I said with a small laugh. We drove out of Boston and into the quieter suburbs of Connecticut, the roads winding past frosted pine trees and hills blanketed in powdery snow. With every mile, the world grew quieter, calmer, more picturesque, like something out of a winter novel. The closer we got, the more I felt my chest tighten, the memory of Christmas Eve creeping back like a bruise. "Lauren," Julian said softly, eyes on the road, "you don't have to impress anyone today. My parents invited you because they genuinely want to know you." "I'm not used to that," I admitted. His fingers tightened around mine. "You deserve it." Those 3 words sat in my chest like something warm and fragile. I held on to them as we approached the estate. Wintercrest Estate rose into view like a snow-capped dream. Ivy-covered stone walls, tall windows glowing with golden light, a sweeping driveway lined with lanterns flickering in the soft breeze. Snow dusted the trees surrounding the main house, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. It was elegant, old world, and quietly magnificent. I breathed out a shaky laugh. "This is intimidating." Julian squeezed my hand. "It's home." And then, softly, "It can be yours too." My breath caught. Before I could respond, the front door opened and a woman stepped out. Evelyn Crest, Julian's mother, stood wrapped in a cream wrap coat, her silver hair in soft waves, her smile warm enough to melt a glacier. "Oh, Lauren," she called, opening her arms as though greeting a daughter she hadn't seen in months. I blinked, stunned, but stepped forward. Evelyn embraced me without hesitation. Not a stiff, polite hug. This was warm, sincere, and heartbreakingly genuine. "We've been looking forward to this," she said, pulling back to cut my cheek. "You're even lovelier than Julian described." Heat climbed into my face. "Thank you. It's wonderful to meet you." She linked her arm with mine, guiding me toward the door. "Come inside, dear. You must be freezing." Inside, Wintercrest Estate felt like stepping into a storybook. A grand staircase curved up to a second floor, garlands hung along the railing, and the smell of cinnamon and warm bread drifted from the kitchen. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, filling the room with amber light. Charlotte, Julian's younger sister, bounded down the stairs wearing a thick red sweater and fuzzy socks. "Lauren!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. "We've heard so much about you." I laughed, actually laughed as she hugged me. "All good things, I hope?" She winked dramatically. "Only the embarrassing stuff." Julian groaned behind us. Charlotte. The room burst into easy laughter, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd walked into a family home where the air didn't grow colder around me. I didn't remember the last time anyone made space for me, emotionally or physically, without me having to earn it through silence or obedience. We settled into the living room where Evelyn served hot mulled cider. The three of them sat comfortably around me, asking about my work, my hobbies, my favorite books, my childhood memories. Not once did they compare me to anyone. Not once did they ask about my family as though expecting a polite performance. When I paused or hesitated, they waited, not impatiently, not judgmentally, but gently, as if giving me time was the most natural thing in the world. It was disorienting, beautifully disorienting. At some point, Charlotte leaned forward. So, is it true you taught yourself Python just because you were bored one summer? I laughed softly. Bored and competitive. I wanted to prove to myself I could learn something new. That's amazing, she said, eyes bright. Teach me sometime? Of course, I said, surprised by how easily the words came. Julian watched me with that soft, steady smile he wore only when he thought I wasn't looking. After tea, Evelyn touched my arm. Come, dear. Walk with me for a moment. She led me down a hallway lined with family photos. Smiling faces, vacations, graduations, Christmas mornings. All the things I never had. All the moments my family had orchestrated without me, even before they removed the chair at their table. We stepped into a small conservatory filled with plants, even in the dead of winter. Evelyn turned to me, her expression sobering slightly. Julian cares for you very deeply, she said quietly. And I can see why. You are thoughtful, strong, and incredibly kind. My throat tightened. She continued gently. I hope you know that whatever your relationship with your own family looks like, you have a place here, always. I blinked quickly, but tears still welled. Thank you, I whispered. You don't know how much that means. She squeezed my hands. Maybe I do. When we returned to the living room, the lights dimmed suddenly, and Charlotte appeared with a cake blazing with tiny sparklers. Surprise! She shouted. We thought we'd have a little celebration. My mouth fell open. A celebration for what? Evelyn smiled. To officially welcome you to our family. I froze, staring at the glowing cake. My own family hadn't bothered to save me a chair for Christmas dinner, and here, people who had known me for only months were celebrating me, because I existed, because I mattered. Julian stepped beside me, his hand brushing mine before intertwining our fingers. You're part of my life, Lauren. I want my family to know the woman I love. My breath caught in my throat. Julian! He guided me forward as his family clapped and cheered. I couldn't wipe the smile off my face if I tried. The glow of the sparklers illuminated the warmth in their eyes, the kind of warmth I'd never seen directed at me across any holiday table. After cake, we took photos in front of the fireplace. Charlotte insisted on capturing every angle, her words, and the flash reflected off the delicate engagement ring on my finger. A photographer cousin snapped a few professional shots too, saying, "These are going to turn out beautifully." I had no idea then that those very photos would spread across social media months later, sparking a wildfire of attention that would reach even the walls of the crumbling Whitmore household. But in that moment, all I felt was joy. Later, Julian and I stepped out onto the back terrace to escape the lively chatter. The estate grounds stretched out around us, gardens sleeping under the snow, lanterns flickering along stone paths, and a sky full of stars. The cold bit at my skin, but Julian wrapped his coat around my shoulders and pulled me close. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. I exhaled, watching my breath cloud in the air. I don't know. This is all new. Too much? Not too much, I said quickly. Just different from anything I've known. Julian brushed his thumb along my jaw. You deserve this kind of warmth. A lump formed in my throat. I'm scared, I admitted. Every time something good happens, I feel like it can disappear just as quickly. He pressed his forehead against mine. This won't disappear. I leaned into him, letting his steadiness anchor me. Inside the house, laughter drifted outward, light, unforced, nothing like the brittle politeness of my childhood home. After a long moment, Julian whispered, "I want you in my family, not later, not someday. Now." My breath trembled. "Are you sure?" He smiled. "I've never been more sure." When we walked back inside, Evelyn approached with a soft, proud smile. "Before the night ends," she said, "I want you to know something." "What's that?" I asked. She glanced between Julian and me. "You will always have a seat at our table, Lauren, no matter the day, no matter the season." My chest tightened, and tears pressed behind my eyes, because those were the words I'd been waiting to hear my entire life. On the drive back that night, the estate lights faded behind us, but the warmth didn't. I rested my head against the window, watching snow drift across the glass in swirling patterns, and I let myself feel something I hadn't allowed in a long time. Hope. Hope for a family I could one day call my own. Hope for a life where I didn't have to beg to belong. Hope that the empty Christmas chair wasn't the end of my story, just the beginning of a new one. And beside me, Julian reached for my hand without a word, as if he knew I'd been waiting for that too. The morning after our visit to Wintercrest Estate, I woke with a kind of warmth I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't from the soft blanket tangled around my legs or the sunlight spilling across my sheets. It came from something deeper, something quieter, the feeling of finally being accepted without conditions. I lay still for a moment, listening to the muffled city sounds outside my window, letting that realization settle. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt wanted. But the feeling was fragile, delicate as frost on a window pane. Because beneath it ran another truth. My family still hadn't called, not once. Not to ask why I'd been missing from the Christmas photos they proudly posted. Not to ask how I'd been, not even to pretend they cared. If anything, the silence confirmed what I'd always known. I didn't belong in their world. Still, as I made coffee and prepared for the week ahead, I found myself replaying moments from the night at Wintercrest. Evelyn's warm smile, Charlotte's easy laughter, Julian's quiet pride when he held my hand. Their kindness had wrapped around me like a blanket I never knew I needed, and though part of me feared it, another part began to bloom in its warmth. By Monday morning, Neuralink was buzzing with its usual energy. Screens flickered, keyboards clicked, and the hum of innovation filled the air like electricity. I walked through the doors feeling steadier than I had in weeks. There were deadlines to meet, prototypes to refine, and a major pitch to finalize. It felt good, comforting, to slip back into the rhythm of something that didn't crumble beneath me. But as I settled into my desk, logging into the system, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Call us. No greeting, no name, no warmth." It was from my father. I locked the screen, refusing to let that be the first thing to shape my day. The team gathered in the main conference room for our weekly briefing. When I walked in, Mason, the CEO, greeted me with a nod. "Morning, Lauren. Good weekend?" I hesitated. "Surprisingly good." He smiled. "Glad to hear it. Let's get started." Presentations began, updates, timelines, risk assessments. When my turn came to discuss the adaptive integration model, I pushed aside the nervous fluttering in my chest and forced myself to stand taller. As I explained the structure of the user behavior mapping, the room grew quiet. Not heavy, focused. People listened. They took notes. They nodded. When I finished, Mason leaned back in his chair, studying the data. Then he looked up at me. "Exceptional work." 2 words, simple, but they warmed something deep inside me. "Thank you," I said, trying not to let my voice tremble. After the meeting, Brianna caught up with me. "Lunch later?" she asked, linking her arm with mine for a moment. "Yeah," I smiled. "I'd like that." She grinned. "Good, you deserve a break." As I turned to head back to my desk, my phone buzzed again. I checked the screen reluctantly. Another message. "You've been ignoring us. Enough. Call your mother." I exhaled slowly, willing myself not to feel that familiar tightening in my chest, the one I'd lived with since childhood. The one that always came when my parents demanded attention, not out of love, but control. I slid my phone into my drawer and focused on the code in front of me. But as the hours passed, the quiet ache in my chest simmered, the ache of being pressured back into old roles I'd fought so hard to escape. At lunch, the ache softened a little. Brianna and Marcus joined me at a cafe across the street. The air smelled of fresh bread and roasted coffee beans, and the chatter of customers felt comforting. We talked about work, holiday mishaps, and the mild chaos of trying to book travel for the upcoming tech event. At one point, Marcus nudged me. "You look different," he said thoughtfully. "Happier." I blinked. "Really?" "Yeah," Brianna nodded, like something heavy lifted off your shoulders. Maybe something had. After lunch, I returned to my desk and opened my email, and right there at the top of my inbox was an invitation. Rising Innovator Award, pre-event photo shoot and PR prep session. My breath hitched. The email congratulated me again and asked me to prepare a short statement about my work and professional journey. A photographer would be on site later that week. They wanted polished, professional shots for press releases. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled. I had never been the one selected for anything like this. Growing up, Selena had been the child who got her picture taken. Every recital, every award, every staged holiday moment. I was the one behind the camera, asked to take the photos or stand quietly to the side. And if I ever stepped in front of the lens, my mother's tight-lipped smile always seemed to imply it was a mistake. But this time, someone wanted me in the spotlight. Not her. Me. I leaned back, overwhelmed by the sharp, unfamiliar mix of pride and disbelief swirling inside me. And then my phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. From my mother. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. "Lauren." Her voice was clipped, impatient. "It's rude to ignore us. Your father is extremely disappointed. Call back immediately." That was it. No, "How are you?" No, "Where have you been?" No apology for Christmas. Just disappointment, just expectation, just demands. I deleted the voicemail without listening to it twice. I wasn't obligated to step back into the shadows they'd shoved me into. Not anymore. That evening Julian called. His face broke into a smile when my screen lit up with his video. "Hey," he said. "How's your day?" "A lot," I admitted, sinking onto my couch. "Good a lot or exhausting a lot?" "Both," I said honestly. His eyes softened. "Want to talk about it?" I told him about the PR announcement, the photo shoot, the nomination. His expression shifted from surprise to pride in a matter of seconds. "Lauren, that's huge," he said quietly. "I knew they'd recognize you eventually." I felt heat rise in my face. "It feels strange. Good, but strange." He nodded. "You deserve every part of it." Then I hesitated, because telling him about the messages, about my father, felt like dragging dirt into something safe. Still, the words slipped out before I could stop them. "They reached out today." He didn't need clarification. His lips pressed into a thin line. "Your parents." "Yes." "What did they want? To talk, or to control?" "I'm not sure there's a difference." Julian's jaw tightened. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I whispered. "But part of me still feels like the scared kid who gets punished for not answering immediately." He leaned closer to the camera. "You are not that child anymore." I swallowed hard. "I'm trying to believe that. And I'll keep reminding you until you do." His voice was steady, grounding. It made the crack in my chest ease just a little. Later that night, after we hung up, I sat at my desk reviewing proposals for the upcoming partnership pitch. Outside, sleet tapped against the window, a soft insistence that pulled me into a rhythm of thought. As I revised data tables, I thought about my grandmother, the only person in my family who had ever shown me unconditional love. I thought of how her voice had trembled on Christmas Eve when she told me what they had done, how she had called me later that night, apologizing even though the decision hadn't been hers. Her words echoed in my mind now. You didn't deserve this. They just don't know who you've become. And maybe that was true. Maybe they would never know, because while they were busy dismissing me, shutting doors, removing chairs from tables, I'd been building something different. A life, a career, a circle of people who didn't require me to shrink. I was becoming someone they could no longer recognize, someone who didn't need their approval to feel whole. As the clock neared midnight, I rubbed my temples and closed my laptop. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the heater. I walked over to the window and stared out at the glowing city lights. In the reflection, I searched for the version of myself I'd been last year, the woman who still clung to the hope that her parents would one day look at her and see something worth celebrating. She wasn't there anymore. The woman in the glass looked steadier, clearer, braver. She looked like someone beginning to understand her worth. And as I stood there, watching snow fall softly against the streetlights, I realized something. My parents' silence wasn't the center of my story anymore. The warmth of Wintercrest Estate, the pride of my colleagues, the rising recognition of my work, the steady love in Julian's voice. Those were the things that shaped me now, not the empty chair at Christmas dinner. I turned off the lights, slid beneath my blankets, and let sleep find me slowly. And before my eyes closed, I whispered into the darkness, I'm done chasing people who don't want me. For the first time, the words didn't hurt. They felt like freedom. The snow had thickened overnight, blanketing the city in heavy drifts that softened sound and slowed traffic to a sluggish crawl. By the time Friday morning arrived, I was already awake before my alarm, lying still beneath the covers, staring at the ceiling as the faint blue of dawn slipped through the blinds. Today was my Rising Innovator photo shoot, the first real public-facing moment of my professional life. The idea thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. I dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal gray blouse and fitted trousers that struck the right balance between confident and understated. As I fastened a simple pair of gold earrings, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked clearer than they had a month ago, my posture straighter. Still, a quiet, nervous energy crackled beneath my skin, as if a storm lingered on the horizon. At Neuralink, the photo team had set up a temporary studio in one of the glass-walled conference rooms. Softbox lights glowed like miniature suns. Backdrops of deep blue and neutral gray hung from metal stands. A table lined with makeup brushes and touch-up products sat to the side. When I stepped inside, a woman with bright auburn hair greeted me warmly. "You must be Lauren," she said. "I'm Celine. I'll be doing your makeup today. Natural, polished, but nothing too heavy. You have great angles." I laughed nervously. "I don't really do photo things." "Well, today you do," she smiled. "Sit, we'll make this painless." As she worked, she kept the conversation light. Nothing probing, nothing intrusive. When she stepped back and handed me a mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. Not because I looked different, but because I looked like someone who deserved to be photographed. The photographer, a man named Alex, waved me over next. "All right, Lauren," he said, clapping his hands. "Congratulations on your nomination. Let's capture the moment." He positioned me under the lights, adjusting angles, nudging my shoulders back, tilting my chin slightly upward. I felt awkward at first, stiff and over-serious, but he cracked a few jokes that helped me ease into the moment. There were shots of me seated with my laptop, standing with crossed arms, smiling candidly, and looking thoughtfully into the distance. After 20 minutes, he lowered the camera. "Perfect. These will look fantastic in the press kit." I nodded, trying to swallow the lump of emotion in my throat. Somewhere deep inside, the kid who had always been asked to step out of family photos whispered, "They're actually choosing you." When Alex left the room, I sat on a chair near the window, letting the weight of it settle. Before I could process it fully, Mason entered, closing the door behind him. "You ready for the press prep session?" he asked. "As ready as I can be." He smiled, but his tone shifted to something more serious. "I'm glad you're being spotlighted, Lauren, but I want you to be prepared. Increased visibility often invites unexpected complications." Complications. My parents, their unanswered messages, their sudden interest in speaking to me. I nodded. "I understand." "No matter what happens," he continued, "we support you fully. Your work speaks louder than anything else." His words steadied me. After the prep session, I returned to my desk, only to find 2 new messages waiting on my phone. One from my mother. "Call me immediately. This behavior is unacceptable." And another from my father. "We need to talk. It's important. Stop ignoring us." The ache in my chest returned, sharp, hot, familiar. But this time, something in me resisted the pull. I set the phone face down and focused on my screen. That afternoon, as I polished the slides for our upcoming partnership pitch, a new email arrived. "Congratulations, Lauren. Your Rising Innovator profile is live on the TechSphere social page." My heart lurched. I clicked the link. There I was. My photo, professional, polished, confident, next to a short summary of my work, accomplishments, and the integration model I'd designed. The article praised my technical insight and highlighted my leadership on the analytics initiative. It was surreal. I scrolled through the comments, dozens of them. "Brilliant engineer, excited to see her presentation." "Finally, someone worth spotlighting." "Women in AI are changing the world." Each word felt like a salve on old wounds. But then I saw it. One comment stood out, posted by a familiar account. My mother's. "So proud of our daughter Lauren. She's always been our shining star." My stomach twisted painfully. My shining star. 3 weeks earlier, she couldn't even be bothered to save me a chair. A hot wave of anger rose in my chest. Not loud, not explosive, controlled, cold. The kind of anger born from years of being erased. I clicked her profile. Every trace of Christmas Eve still lingered. Photos of my father carving dinner, Selena posing in her pink velvet dress beside the tree, my grandmother smiling faintly. But when I found the group photo, my empty space replaced with a decorative poinsettia, I had to look away. My phone buzzed. Another message. "You're embarrassing us. Call back." I closed my laptop at once, the emotional collision too heavy to carry. I needed air. Outside, the wind howled through the narrow streets as I walked briskly, letting the bitter cold sting my cheeks awake. Snow swirled violently. My breath hitched in the frigid air. I reached the small park near the river, the one place I always found grounding. The bench was covered in fresh snow, but I brushed it off and sat down. My heart pounded hard against my ribs. Anger, hurt, confusion, pride, hope. A storm of emotions clashing all at once. I didn't even hear footsteps crunching in the snow behind me until someone sat down beside me, Julian. He didn't say anything at first. He placed a thermos in my hands. Warmth seeped into my skin. I stared ahead. "How did you find me?" "You weren't answering," he said softly. "I figured you'd be here." Something in me cracked open. "Why do they only want me when it benefits them?" I whispered. He exhaled, long and slow. "Because some people don't see your worth until someone else does." I clenched the thermos tighter. "It hurts." "I know." "They ignored me for years," I said, voice trembling. "Then Christmas happened. And now suddenly I'm their shining star? I can't." I shook my head. "I can't be what they want when they only want the version of me that gives them something." Julian gently turned my face toward him. "You don't owe them anything." "But they're still my family." "Family is who shows up," he said firmly, "not who demands." The wind howled louder, but somehow his words quieted the storm inside me. I leaned into him slightly, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, shielding me from the biting cold. For a few minutes we sat in silence, watching snowflakes drift and settle along the riverbank. Then Julian murmured, "Do you want to know something?" I glanced up. My father saw the Rising Innovator announcement. He told me, "That young woman is going to change the future of this field." My breath caught. "He said that?" Julian nodded. "He also said that if you ever consider launching your own project or product, he'd be interested in investing." Heat rose in my cheeks. "Are you serious?" "Completely." I looked down at my hands. "I don't know how to accept that kind of support." "You accept it," he said softly, "because you earned it." The wind softened, carrying the faint scent of pine from the trees behind us. I closed my eyes. A heavy tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness but from the painful, overwhelming realization that maybe I wasn't broken after all. Maybe I had simply been in the wrong environment my whole life. Julian brushed the tear away gently. "Come on," he murmured. "Let's get you